Hi, and welcome to Rock and Metal Invasion. My name is Steve. Coming up on the show today, I'm doing music and the internet, the good and the bad. So, since the arrival of the internet, its impact on music has been, I think, both good and also maybe not so good. First, the good. I have access to almost any music I want to hear. Now, that can, of course, also be a bad thing because it can be a little bit overwhelming. So much music, so little time. However, no longer do I have to feel frustrated about not being able to find that undiscovered album that I've read about in the magazine but never see at my local record shop. And let's be honest, probably never going to see it. Magazines. Now, the internet potentially has killed them as well. But, and I used to love reading the magazines back in the day. But again, that's probably a topic for another day. Anyway, these days, if I want to listen to something, I just Google the band and the album, and there it is. So, streaming or playing downloaded music, for most people, probably doesn't sound as good as a CD. And for me, it certainly doesn't sound as good as vinyl. But it actually sounds pretty good. It's more than acceptable. And that's why I don't bother buying many CDs these days. I mean, I still buy them, but usually only when there's no vinyl available. Because I still like to have the physical product if it is an album that I like. I like collecting music, especially vinyl, and I like to have a music collection that reflects my taste in music. I've always liked to have a music collection, all the way from back in the day, back in the mid 80s when I first really got into music. But when I was buying music, it was more about actually having access to that music. Now I have access to almost all the music. And it's more about actually having the music as a collection. So, I mean, yes, I like to look at the pictures, read the liner notes and, maybe read the lyrics, but I can still do all that online as well. For me, it's more about having the sound of vinyl record producers and to have the physical product, not some file on my computer or some streamable link. Anyway, like I said, back in the day, it was more about finding music and then buying that music so I had access to it. And that's actually something I miss. I miss that thrill of finding that record you've been searching for, or even that blind buy that ended up being such a great record, it doesn't leave your turntable for weeks on end. So yes, blind buy. Back in the day, I hardly ever purchased anything I had already heard. Maybe I heard one or two songs, maybe. But these days, it's the opposite. I almost never buy anything I haven't already checked out, I haven't listened to online. And I have to say, back in the day, the blind buy was usually fairly successful. And let's face it, hair metal, it's pretty easy to recognize. And that was the type of music I was into. So, yeah, it wasn't that blind a buy in a lot of ways. I knew, for the most part, what it was going to sound like. And yeah, sure, there were some disappointments. But to be honest with you, usually it was just varying degrees of greatness. Here's the thing. When back in the day when I would buy an album, I'm financially invested. I want to enjoy the album. I've spent my hard-earned money to buy it. And this is back when back in the 80s when I'm a teenager, not earning a lot of money. It's a big investment. God damn it, this album is going to be good. And I'm going to listen to it over and over again until it is good. It didn't always work, but that's what I would do. I'd give the album a really good chance. These days, I might stream it once, twice if you're lucky. And if it doesn't do anything for me, I move on. Am I giving it a fair chance? Probably not. But in the time that it took me to listen to that album, 3 or 4 new albums that I might be interested have already become available for me to listen to. There's just so much music. And the more music you know about, the more music you want to investigate. And then you realize there's not enough time, so you've got to pick and choose what you listen to and what you invest your time with. And sometimes some of the best albums don't become one of the best albums until you've given it more than 2 plays. Believe it or not, I didn't like Appetite for Destruction when I first heard it, but I kept playing it. And then radio and music TV started playing it, and I started loving it. So, yeah, I mean, the way my love for that album developed over time is probably something that isn't going to happen again, at least not for me. But also back in the day, I didn't even know what I was missing out on. I didn't know about Wildside, Bangalore Choir, etc. Now, I remember finding this album, Hurricane Alice. It would have been mid-90s, here on vinyl. I mean, the front cover was all I needed to see. I'm like, I'm taking you home. Also, it's the mid-90s. It's on vinyl and it's hair metal. So it cost me like $2. Ironically, they can probably now sell for like almost 3 figures. So that experience with Hurricane Alice is so much more enjoyable than finding an album online and streaming it. Now, in saying that, I do enjoy finding an album online that I haven't heard before, giving it a listen, and if I like it, I then will try and get a physical copy. However, of course, like I said before, some of these albums that were like $2 in the mid-90s on vinyl, not so cheap these days. So, because I'm a music collector, I still enjoy going to record shops and, record fairs. The problem is, due to the internet, there now aren't as many music shops as there used to be. Now, almost everyone was buying music back in the day, even if it was just 1 or 2 albums a year. These days, those casual music fans, they're just downloading or streaming their music. So shopping for records or CDs is probably more for, these days, I think, more for the more serious music fan or the collector. And people can buy almost anything online now. And I agree, buying online is fun. I love Discogs and other sites where you can buy music. But it doesn't quite compare to looking through crates of records in the hope of finding that grail you've been wanting for your collection. Now, some may disagree with this, but socially, talking about music, discussing music, and interacting with others that have a similar taste in music, I think has improved with the arrival of the internet. Sure, the record shop could be a social scene. But for me, I got to be honest, when I'm hunting for records, I don't really want to spend my time standing around chatting. I mean, don't get me wrong, I did enjoy talking to the person behind the counter about music and, what's coming out, or even occasionally talking to someone in the shop. And I still do that, probably even more than I did back in the day when I get the chance, because I don't get the chance to do it so much these days. And in fact, I even, when I was young, thought working in a music shop was going to be my dream job. So what did I do in my mid-20s? Well, I decided I'm going to quit my well-paid computer job that I had and go work in a music shop. And I did that for probably close like 2 years. But it wasn't quite what I imagined. I actually remember at the time the Cher album Believe was really popular. I heard it so much that actually you might think, well, I don't like it anymore. I actually quite like that album. And I have a couple of, Cher albums in my collection, from the 80s that had some, decent hard rock songs on them. But, when I was working in the music shop, selling Cher albums wasn't really why I wanted to work in a music shop. Also, the owner of the shop didn't like it when I played anything that wasn't on the charts. So playing metal, it's pretty much a big no-no. This is like late 90s, mid-90s. One thing, and again, I'm getting off subject here, but one thing I do remember about my time at the music shop was, it was 1998, and this music shop I worked in was fairly mainstream. Okay, it didn't have, it didn't have rare imports or anything like that or unusual things. Very mainstream, but it actually had a copy of the Trixter album on CD, the second Trixter album here, and it had, because we dated when the CDs arrived, it had been in the shop since 1992, so 6 years in that shop, and no one had bought it. I ended up buying it. Good album, much better than the first album, but it just goes to show how sort of unpopular that sort of music was, in the mid-80s. Anyway, let's get back on topic. So socially, having the internet has improved music conversations, I think. For example, would you be enjoying this rant right now without the internet? No. But I mean, seriously, for me, it's been really good because all of a sudden I've got access to people who appreciate Hurricane Alice or Trixter. Now, back in the day, these people weren't so easy to find. And in the mid-80s, if these people did exist, they weren't exactly advertising their love for hair metal. So I've been able to connect with lots of very knowledgeable people who also have music channels. And it's, for me, really created an outlet for musical discussion, but also for friendships, which has been fantastic. But, it's not even just the people who have their own music channel like me. There's people who regularly contribute to comments on my page, and I really enjoy and appreciate that aspect as well. So, back in the day, if you were successful, you could actually make quite a lot of money selling albums. If you're a musician, selling albums, selling records, you could make quite a bit of money. But these days, the rich rock star is a dying breed. But in saying that, almost anyone these days can be a rock star. You can record an album, put it on the internet, see what happens. And that has its pros and cons. The pros are, these days there are no gatekeepers saying, your band is good and I'm going to promote you and give you the chance to record an album. These days the band can do that themselves. The cons are, things have got a little diluted. There's no quality control. It's hard to find what's good because there's too much music, which is a weird thing for a music fan to say. So one of the other reasons I like to collect music is that, I want to support the artists financially. We all know they make very little money from streaming. So if they've produced something that has given me enjoyment, I've got no problem giving them money in return. And with the internet, the money can potentially go straight to them and not to the record company. And if I can't get a physical copy of an album, then I have to say I prefer to download it rather than stream it. For me, it's the next best thing to having a physical copy. Even albums, and I've got a lot of records and CDs, but even albums that I have physical copies of, I like to have as an MP3. Because as much as I love vinyl, sometimes it's a bit of a hassle to get a record out just because I want to play one particular song. I remember some people thought, and I understand why, but some people thought downloading of music was going to kill the music industry. Well, it didn't kill the music industry, but it definitely changed it. I remember back in the day, some albums would say things like, home taping is killing the music industry. This Lee Aaron album actually says here, if you enjoyed this album, please help the artist. Get your friends to buy a copy, not tape yours. But, really, taping on cassette was nothing compared to what has happened on the internet. And, I don't really remember taping other people's albums, but I definitely remember very much back in the day taping songs off the radio. That was something I used to do. And I remember being really annoyed at the DJ who would talk over the song intro. because I never wanted to, start actually recording the song until he stopped talking. So he'd miss the intro sometimes. Anyway, those days. So, music and the internet. Has music got better or worse since the arrival of the internet? I think I'm going to say both. There's some good things and there's some not so good things. There are pros and there are cons. What do you think? Has music got better or worse since the arrival of the internet? Let me know in the comments. All right, that's it for this episode. I'll catch you later.